people often don't realize that, but being a monk or a nun is intensely social. It's far more social than most of us can imagine, because you essentially have no privacy. So it's just complete social. And in the traditional training is that everybody sleeps in one room. All the trainees sleep in one room, and they have like the little tiny, sort of cubby hole or suitcase or something to put their stuff in. And that's it. And they don't have like anywhere to go to get away from everybody else. And then it's very hierarchical, the way that it's organized. And so it's far more social in the sense of your identity is shaped by the people around you than most of us can imagine. And it's extremely intense that way. And that's why a lot of people leave. Not very many people finish monastic training. And one of the reasons is the loss of privacy. It's just very hard for people. So I wanted to make that comment. And then I also want to make a comment on the Abhidharma. In the versions of the Abhidharma that I know, and I don't know them well, the object that the mind is perceiving is your thoughts. And that's very interesting because, like, we're all looking at a computer screen right now. And we know that we are not that computer screen. It's external to us. We are looking at that computer screen. And you all are listening to my voice. And because you're all muted, I'm not listening to your voice. But my voice is not part of you. You are listening to my voice. And I can hear birds singing, not right now, but a minute ago I could. And I know that they're external. They're not part of my identity. So thinking of thoughts, that's an interesting phrase. Thinking of thoughts as the objects of perception of the mind is giving you a great big hint, which is that you are not your thoughts. We think we're our thoughts. So a long time ago, I was doing a 3-week retreat in a little cabin in Massachusetts. And it's a cabin with an interesting history. It's at a retreat center, which was built by, I think, Quakers. And it's like little individual cabins. And there are many people. That the cabin I was in was actually built by a teacher in our school, Link Rhodes, and many people in our school have done retreats there. And so I was doing a retreat in this cabin in at Temenos Center, and my brother lived nearby. So when I was done with the retreat, I went to his house to shower and visit and everything like that. And I was telling him that I started out keeping a diary to keep track of the days so I'd know when to leave. And I said, well, I started, but it was just encouraging my thinking. And I was just thinking and writing and analyzing. And so I realized that this was a really bad idea. And so I stopped, and instead like an entry would go something like orange newt on walk. That would be an entry, Bird song outside cabin, that would be an entry. And he was really surprised. He said, well, why didn't you want to write down your thought and your emotion? Because how else will you know who you are? And I said, that's not who I am, and that's not who you are, and that's not who anybody is. We're not our thoughts and our emotions. And they just drift, they're like clouds, and sometimes you're in a rainstorm and it's really raining heavily, and you don't have a raincoat and you don't have an umbrella and there's no place to go and you really get wet. Yeah, I understand that. We all understand that. Yeah. But it's really important to understand that you are not your thoughts, that they're what your mind perceives. And another interesting exercise for that, and this is a sort of classic meditation technique, is as you're sitting, thoughts arise. We all know thoughts arise. They arise and they arise and they arise. And so one classic meditation technique is try to catch the thought as it's arising. And nobody's ever done it, to my knowledge. They just sort of appear, right? So it's really interesting, the Abhidharma. And that's all I'm going to say about the Abhidharma right now. I don't know very much more about it. I know very little about it. It's interesting because sometimes people, it's very important to be clear that losing a sense is not the end of the world. A lot of people go blind. A lot of people go deaf. And they will tell you that is far, far, far from the end of the world. And so it's very important to not feel that we have to be what our society considers whole, and I'm putting that in quotes, that we have to have all 5 senses working perfectly, that we have to have our mind working perfectly, that we have to have every part of our body working perfectly. It's very important not to hold on to that, so that when we lose something, and eventually we're going to lose everything, but so that when we lose something, we don't lose our center. So that's very important. But that's not negating the difficulties of that experience. Yeah, the sense of smell is very important. It's a warning. It's a pleasure, right? It's spring. Everyone goes around, sticks their nose in lilac bushes, right? So, yeah. So it's interesting to suddenly lose this thing that you're completely take for granted, right? Yeah, and it's very difficult to get accustomed to that. And your smell is very important because it leads to taste, which leads to eating. Sometimes people stop eating when they lose their sense of smell. So yeah, so that's a very interesting experience that you had. And I'm always uncomfortable when people say something's a teaching, because it implies that the universe exists for us, which it doesn't. We exist for the universe. It's the other way around. But yeah, we can learn. We can learn from something like that. And I'm glad that you can smell again. And I hope you continue to be able to smell again as long as you live. But yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I had a friend who, he actually has COVID right now. He lives in, where does he live? Alabama. He became paraplegic about 20 or 30 years ago, very suddenly, an accident. And it was a very interesting, at first he had this terrible depression and fear, because who wouldn't, all of a sudden you're paraplegic. And, but then as he went through therapy, he actually became more of an athlete than he ever had before. They had these like summer camps that were therapeutic summer camps, and we do things like windsurfing and zip lining and upper body strength and everything like that. And so this thing that happened to him that took away so much of his life, it was and I'm not saying it's a good thing that it happened, because it's not bad, it's not good, it just happened. But it was interesting how afterwards it's like something else opened up for him that had not quite been opened up as much before. So our life is like that. Whatever you have, how do you use this? How do you use what you're given? How do you use what your situation is? And now we're all in this screen culture. It is so bizarre, Tom. It's just really, really bizarre. Yeah, we're all in this screen culture. And how do we use this culture? How do we, some of us are using it to reach out across the world. They're just on my screen. I see people from, all over the planet. And so, yeah. So what do we do in this situation? Every situation we have, how do we use it? I also want to address your, when you said about feeling guilty about feeling bad. Don't. Your life is your life. And, feeling uncomfortable, feeling sadness, feeling anger, feeling grief, that's a way that we have of incorporating what happens to us. And it's a natural process. And we can't say, well, you know, I broke my toe, but this person broke her hip and that person broke his spine. So I broke my toe, so I shouldn't feel bad because this person broke her hip. And the person broke her hip says, well, I shouldn't feel bad because this person, no, go feel bad. It's fine. You know, be pissed off, be whatever it is, be uncomfortable, be in pain, whatever it is. But look at it. How do you use this? If we don't experience our own suffering, how can we help anyone else with their suffering? I have a friend who coaches people about anxiety, and she's a tremendously anxious person. And at first, I found this kind of weird. And then I realized who better to coach people about anxiety than someone who has to deal with it. You know, I'm not a very anxious person. I'm the last person you want to ask about anxiety because I don't have it that much. So yeah, how do you use whatever comes to you, whether it's, you know, being paraplegic or losing your sense of smell or being anxious, whatever it is, how do you use it to help this world? That's the question. So thank you very much for your question. Yeah, so this question of, you know, there's meditation like medicine, and then there's meditation to see our true self. Oh, you guys can't see my hands. There's meditation to see our true self, to really, you know, see our true self. And the meditation that's like medicine is very useful. Medicine is useful. And the analogy I like to use is diabetes. So if you have type 1 diabetes, you will never be cured. You have to take your medicine every day. And meditation like medicine is like that insulin shot that you have to take every day or several times a day. It's very sophisticated now, I'm not sure. And you're completely dependent on that. If you don't have it, you're going to fall apart. Type 2 diabetes, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, and I've known people who've done this, through very careful attention to diet and exercise, if it's not gone too far, if you're early in the process, you can actually stop it. You don't have to take that external medicine all the time. You still, however, have to pay attention to your diet and your exercise. So are we looking for a treatment or are we looking for a cure? And a cure does, like I said, like with type 2 diabetes, a cure doesn't mean you're done and you can walk away and then you can eat all the candy and cake and drink Coca-Cola and alcohol and stuff like that and lie on your couch, you know, eating bonbons and potato chips while you're watching Netflix and binging and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that. You still have to take your daily run and you still have to, you know, eat your healthy food and stuff like that. But the focus of it is different. It's not focused on alleviating these symptoms, these difficult symptoms that we live with of our pain and our suffering and our anger and our grief and our sorrow, all of these things, our anxiety. It's no longer about us, it becomes about this world. And you're completely correct. This is a communal practice. And even if you go off on a long solo retreat, which I've done several times, you're still being supported by a community. And this community is not just the Kansas Zen Center, and it's not just the Quantum School of Zen, and it's not even just all human beings. Every sentient being is part of this community. And part of what we see as we sit on the cushion is these layers of self-absorption kind of release themselves. They release themselves and they release themselves. And we get to what's more and more fundamental. And as we begin to touch things that are more and more fundamental, then the boundaries that separate us from everything weaken. And then your suffering is my suffering, which doesn't necessarily mean that I feel as bad as you feel, but it means that I am motivated to help. I can't not want to help. You know, it's very difficult. Well, the thing that's really hard about this COVID stuff, I mean, I was talking to a friend who may or may not have it, and this person is feeling really miserable. I can't go over there and, you know, bring this person some soup, make this person some tea. It's because that's the natural, you know, we have a friend and the friend is feeling really bad, and we want to just rush over there. We want to give them a hug. We want to give them a little massage, something, you know, and right now we can't do that. So that's very strange, very, very strange. But yeah, Jonathan, keep practicing, you know, and then, so I remember when I was first starting to practice, you know, the first of the 4 great vows is sentient beings are numberless. We vow to save them all. And you think about that, that's ridiculous. You know, how do you do that? Can't even save myself is what a lot of people say. But yeah, so there we are. It's actually, think of it as liberation more than saving. So we vow to liberate them all. I remember saying to Diane Eagles, who is the founder of Dharma Crafts, and had been practicing longer than me, and she's a very tiny woman, and so there we were, you know, practicing, and afterwards I said to her, how do you save all beings? And she sort of stood herself up on tiptoe. I mean, I'm not a very tall person, but she's really tiny. Stood herself up on tiptoe and patted me on the head and said, you'll figure it out. You know. And then there's the, you know, story which I think everyone in the school loves to tell of Zen Master Subang, who was a monk, Subang Sanim, who was really sort of Zen Master Sungsang's designated heir, but then he suddenly died from a massive heart attack at the age of 52, giving an interview in Hong Kong to a 12-year-old girl. Can you imagine a 12-year-old girl having a Zen interview and the teacher falls over dead? But anyway, so before he was a monk and before he was a teacher, he was Si Hoi Liao was his name. He was from Hawaii and a sculptor, and he was very irreverent towards Zen Master Sungsan, and Zen Master Sungsan really liked that. He liked that this guy talked back to him. And Si Hoi Liao wrote a postcard to Zen Master Sungsan, and all it said was, what is the fast track to Zen? And Zen Master Sungsan wrote back, not for me. So you have to be careful when you say this, because then people can hear it as, well, it's not for me, it's for someone else. But that's not what it means. It means the direction is not about me. It's not about fixing myself. It's about this whole universe. How can I help? Right now, in this moment, how can I help? So that's what practice leads us to. Yeah. That's not what not for me means. Not for me does not mean it's not for me to do. It means the direction of my practice is not to help myself. It's not about me. So fast path, slow path doesn't matter. You know, in Korean Zen, there's a very strong tradition that any kind of awakening is just a sign that you have to continue practice. Even if it's one of those cosmic awakenings where the earth shakes and the stars explode and bodhisattvas come down from the sky and you fall in a faint, you know, in a puddle of water and don't drown, you know, whatever. Even in one of those sort of cosmic feeling awakenings, you know, little feeling, big feeling doesn't matter. Any kind of awakening is an awakening to the need to practice. So, but the direction of the practice is very important. the direction of the practice is not helping me feel good. The direction of the practice is to help this world. That said, sometimes our so-called negative feelings, and I don't like calling them negative feelings because they're natural, sometimes they overwhelm us and we can't function. We can't see outside our own little world. You know, I'll tell you another story. A long, long time ago, when I was a hippie in Haight-Ashbury and I was taking a lot of drugs, which I should not have done, I don't recommend it, and I took this acid trip and the world was pasted inside my skull. There was nothing outside my skull and it was a nightmare. And what I looked at was the only thing that existed. So I was constantly turning around because something that could have gotten me, because if I couldn't see it, you know, it was obviously not very sensible because, hey, I was stoned. But this sense of not being able to see outside our skull, in some metaphorical sense, a lot of times we're like that. You know, happiness can make us like that too. You ever, you know, you're so happy that you don't understand why anybody would feel sad. I think everyone's experienced that. So sometimes we just have to kind of break free of this prison that we made for ourselves. And then we need techniques other than Zen practice. Like if you come down with type 2 diabetes, you need that insulin. And then after a while, maybe you don't need it. But it's really important to understand what Zen practice can do and what it can't do. It's not a medication that helps all emotional states that prevent us from functioning. Like my friend with the anxiety, who's really great at helping people with anxiety. And I'm not so great at helping people with anxiety. So yeah, so we come back to how do you use your karma? How do you use your life?